So what do you need to do if you need a certificate for working? So I can only generally speak about our clinic here at 10 Hammersmith Broadway. And if you live in a different part of London or you live outside London, it's always worth speaking to your local sexual health clinic to find out what their process is, because it can be different depending where in the country you are, how long results take to come through. So always talk to your local clinic about it. Or you can speak to us and we can help you find a local clinic and speak to them as well. So always feel you can use us as a resource. So when you need a certificate, it's always good to know in advance when you need to work, because we're an NHS service, we're an incredibly busy service, and we can't always fit people in at very last moments. Or if we do testing, for example today, and you've got to shoot tomorrow, you may not get your results back by tomorrow. So it's about trying to work as much as possible with us so that you can get the service that you need and the certificate when you need it. So at 10 Hammersmith Broadway, we either make appointments on the same day, so you can call our call centre, or the evening before. From 5 o'clock you can go onto our website, which is 10 Hammersmith Broadway, which is part of Chelsea and Westminster, and we have online booking, so we have a certain amount of appointments that you can book online for the next day. When you call our service, if you're calling to you come through our appointments line, the first thing they'll ask you is, have you got any symptoms? Now, generally speaking, if you're coming in for a certificate, you don't have any symptoms. If you explain this to the person who's answering the call, but explain that you work in the adult entertainment industry and that you need a certificate, they will book you in. Generally speaking, we don't see people without symptoms in our clinic, but if you explain that you work in the industry, they'll be able to book you in. When you attend, I'm sure you've been to sexual health clinics before, but if you haven't, we'll ask you a full sexual history, we'll do all the testing, explain at the time to the person that you're seeing that you work in the adult industry, because we may offer you slightly different testing if you work in the industry. And they may at that point ask you for some photo ID, so they may ask you for your passport or driving licence or an identity card, and then they'll document that in your notes, and then they'll do all the tests. What they'll do then is that they will ask you to email the clinic requesting a certificate of your results. So when you do that, it's really important that you put your name, your date of birth, your special clinic number. You'll be given a confidential clinic number when you attend the clinic, so make sure you have that before you leave. It usually starts with an L followed by 3 zeros and then a number, so always make sure you've got that number before you leave, and they'll give you the email address to contact us. You then need to email us requesting your certificate with all the information. It's good to enclose also, even if we've already seen your ID in the clinic, it's good to put the same ID or attach it to the email, so your passport or driving licence or whatever. And then we will, as a team, we will try and sort out your certificates as quickly as possible. Now, it's important to remember that although we try and do the certificates as quickly as we can, it may take up to a week for you to get your certificate, depending on how busy we are or how long it takes for your results to come back. So please be aware of that. If you need your certificate urgently for any reason, if you let us know, we may be able to do the certificate a little bit more quickly, but we can't promise that. So if if we can try and work together, you with what you need and us being an NHS service and being very busy, we will try and work with you to get everything that you need. But what speeds it up is giving us all the information in the email plus putting on your photo ID, and then we can do that. We document your photo ID on the certificate, so that's why we need that, because that helps as an extra element of identification when you're giving the certificate, when you're showing the certificate to people that you're working with. So routinely, when you come in for a sexual health screen, when you're working in the industry, we would routinely test you for gonorrhea, chlamydia, and depending where you've had sex, we would do 3-site testing, so we would do a throat swab, a rectal swab and a vaginal swab, depending on what genitals you have. We would also do blood tests for HIV and syphilis, hepatitis C and hepatitis B to see whether you've got any immunity or whether you need any vaccination. They would be the routine tests that we do. If you have symptoms, we may do different tests. We may also test you for something called trichomonas vaginalis. We might also test you for mycoplasma genitalium. But those are only tests that we would do if you had symptoms. They're not tests that are routinely done if you're asymptomatic, if you don't have any symptoms. People often ask us how frequently you should test. To a certain extent, that depends on how often you're working in the industry. We wouldn't recommend any more frequently than once a month. Again, it depends on how frequently you're working, but once a month seems to be very common, or once every 3 months, again, depending on how often you're working. So if you need to have a test every 28 days, if you need to make sure there are no gaps in between your certificate, again, make sure that when you're in the clinic you explain that to the person that you're seeing. Sometimes we may be able to book you an appointment in advance for those 28 days. Other times we may ask you to make sure that you ring us before, or book online before you need your certificate, so that we can make sure that there's no gap, or as little gap as possible, in between your certification and your testing procedures. So we know that sometimes it can be quite difficult to get an appointment. We know that NHS clinics are very oversubscribed at the moment, so you may find it difficult to get an appointment when you need it. There are a lot of postal testing kits services that are now set up in London and across the country. There's a local test to Hammersmith, a local postal testing kit called Sexual Health London, SHL. And they're very easy to use, so you just log onto their website, you make an account, and they will send you a postal test kit to your house, or you can pick one up here in the clinic. And they do the same testing generally as we do in the clinic. They advise if you've got symptoms that you come to a clinic for testing, because they don't do testing for things like trichomonas or mycoplasma on the online testing. So if you've got symptoms, it's always better to come to a clinic and be tested. But if you've got no symptoms, then it's perfectly advisable or possible to do the home testing kit. The testing is very accurate. It's the same as testing that we do in the clinic, so you needn't be concerned that it's not as accurate or anything like that. It's perfectly sensible and a good way to test. However, you may find that that the testing services via post, they're not able to provide you with a certificate. Usually what happens is that when you get your results, you log into their database and you can see your results there, and they're sent to you on your phone. Now, that might be acceptable if you're working, you can show your phone with your results on it, but there's not going to be any photo ID or any sort of signature on a certificate. So depending on who you're working for and what people find acceptable in your working environment, that may not be suitable for you. But it certainly is a very accurate way of testing if you don't have any symptoms.